Hello, my name is David Wells and I am delighted to be with the Diocese of San Bernardino and to be working with you and Dr. Samuel Torres, and this is part 3 of 3 videos. In part 1 I proposed that it's possible for our worlds to shrink, that somehow we can become consumed by our own list of jobs and somehow lose a little bit of our humanity in the process. We shrink our world and we become about our own tasks, and then we lose a sense of each other. In part 2, I proposed that in our shrinkage we can lose our virtue, and in actual fact the other thing we can lose is our why. I proposed in the second video, of course, that our why might give us life if we can stay tuned into it, and I offered you a brief explanation of part of the why of Catholic education, that the glory of God is a person fully alive, and a person fully alive is educated. So we need you, whatever you teach, whoever you teach, to do what you do. So if you've not heard anything else in these videos yet, I hope you can hear this. Thank you for choosing to work in a Catholic school. I really mean that. Thank you. Probably be easier maybe to have chosen a different career. I don't know. It's certainly not easy being a teacher or working in a Catholic school. Like any school has its demands. But thank you, because I believe you've chosen a noble profession, a truly noble job. But in this last part, I want to give the other half of why. Firstly, I propose that the Catholic Church builds schools to help people to discover who they are, to grow in dignity. And that growing in dignity enables us to be authentic. And I propose that that is a really significant why. The glory of God is a person fully alive, fully knowing who they are and why they're here. But there's another part to the why, and this concludes our triptych. The other half of why is love of God, love of neighbour. It's about loving outwards. And this for me is very interesting because Pope Benedict unites those two commands, love of God and love of neighbour, in his preaching about the life of Jesus. He says Jesus brings those two things together. When we love our neighbour, we are loving God. Take a look at Matthew 25 if you want to explore that a little bit. When you do it to the least of my brothers, says Jesus, you do it to me. So what is part 2 about of the why? Well, it goes a little bit like this. It's not just about our own personal fulfillment. It's also about the fulfillment of our world, of creation, and of our neighbour. In fact, this is really critical, otherwise Catholicism is just self-help, really. In his recent document, Pope Francis wrote an encyclical, and it's called Fratelli Tutti. I just like saying it, Fratelli Tutti, brothers, sisters, all. And in this document, he talks to us a little bit about the pandemic. He talks in chapter 1 about dark clouds over a closed world. That when we shrink, when our worlds become small-minded, we build what he calls a culture of wall building. We begin to treat strangers as a threat. We begin to see the people we don't know as an enemy, perhaps here to steal our life. And we concentrate on the things that separate us rather than the things that unite us. If you read chapter 1, you see a fairly staunch reflection on the state of the world when it becomes introspective, when it becomes about my problems, my concerns. And as soon as we do that, we lose a little bit of our why we're here. We are born, suggests the Church, not to succeed, but to love. So what does it mean for us in a Catholic school? Well, Pope Francis puts it like this, September the 9th, 2020. He said, a virus that does not recognise barriers, borders or cultural or political distinctions must be faced, he says, by love, without barriers, without borders and without distinctions. The Catholic school in the end is a family in a family of families brothers, sisters, all, and no one is to be excluded. So in the end, part of our why is about our engagement with one another. An encounter, an experience of a Catholic education should help us to love our neighbour. Now, Pope Francis does a very interesting thing at this point. He reminds us, he says, if you want to stay young, this is very challenging. He says, make sure in your life there's somebody who doesn't look like you, sound like you, or agree with you. That dialogue is vibrant. It's not a threat, it's an opportunity. People who are different to us are not threats, they are opportunities. You may not be aware, perhaps, that in 1219, Saint Francis goes with the Crusades to meet the Sultan, Malak al-Kamil, the most powerful Muslim in all the world. And there, Saint Francis meets with the senior Muslim, and the two of them encounter each other, and both start to try to convert the other. And they debate back and forth, but slowly, systematically, as brothers, they start to regard each other with more and more and more respect, until there comes a time when they describe each other as brothers. Why does that matter? It matters because in 2019, 800 years later, Pope Francis goes to meet the Grand Imam al-Azhar, and together they write a letter in which they call each other brothers. And Pope Francis reminds us, if I can engage, if I can dialogue, and if I can grow in respect of other people who are not like me, who don't look like me, who don't sound like me, who don't believe the things I believe in, if I can do it, it is no threat to who I am, and it can help me to grow. And if I can do it, reminds Pope Francis, then we all can. The truth of it is, in the end, that a Catholic school is there to help us to grow in love with our neighbour, whoever our neighbour turns out to be. That's another part of our why, is the love of other. The love of other because God is always present. Doesn't sound so easy, doesn't it? But let me put it into the words of Pope Benedict. Pope Benedict put it fabulously. We get the whole purpose of a Catholic school here. Are you ready? And Pope Benedict says, the programme, the mission, the purpose of Jesus Christ, I'm going to quote him, is a heart which sees. A heart which sees. And then he adds, this heart sees where love is needed and acts accordingly. There's your mission statement right there. Education is, in fact, an act of love. Now, why is it an act of love? If you go back to the very beginning of Pope Francis's pontificate, back in 1213, he's speaking to Antonio Spadaro. It's an interview in America magazine, and he's going to spell this out right at the start. He says, I want you to see anything called Catholic as a field hospital in battle. You go, what? A field hospital in battle? What are you talking about? Well, you go, look, I'm a school, not a hospital. Please don't ask me to administer medication. You go, no, that's not what it means. What do we do in a Catholic school? We heal people, but we heal them of ignorance. That's what we heal them of. We're not healing them of illness, we're healing them of ignorance. And why does that matter? Well, it matters because in the Catholic tradition, ignorance is the beginning of fear. And fear is where all war starts. Fear is where prejudice and racism starts. Fear is where sexism and misogyny start. Fear is always of the unknown. We're afraid of the dark. We're afraid of what's ahead. We're afraid of what's round the corner. We're afraid of the things we don't know. Education puts the light on. Science, arts, poetry, athleticism, music, drama. Education turns on the light of knowing, and that light chases away fear. At the heart of the Catholic school is the light of Christ, all-knowing. And what that does is it sends jets, beams of light into the darkest places. Education is of itself healing, and that's what we do. And as people become less afraid, they grow in dignity and they grow in confidence. And that's why we built the classroom that you teach in. And you're doing that whether you're teaching religion or science or the arts or numbers, you're doing it. So keep hearing. If you hear nothing else, thank you. It may strike you as a bit obvious, but wherever Jesus went, he was always making people whole. He was telling them the things they needed to hear in love so that they could flourish. Sometimes it was things they liked and wanted, and sometimes it wasn't. But he spoke the truth in light to give dignity and confidence. It's the most beautiful story. And what that story is the foundation stone of our Catholic schools. Which is why Pope Francis writes, he says, young people, this is beautiful. He says, if you've lost your inner vitality, if you've lost your dream, if you've lost your enthusiasm, if you've lost your optimism and your generosity, he says, Jesus stands before you as light, as truth. As once he stood before the dead son of the widow, and with all the power of his resurrection, he urges you, says Pope Francis, young man, young woman, I say to you, arise. When a young person leaves your school, standing confidently before the world and the future, you've done your job. You've done your job. Amen to you. It's worth working hard for because it's beautiful and it changes our relationship to challenge. It means that we can walk into the unknown, bolder, more confident, that somehow we can leave this planet in a better state than we found it. Pope Francis writes in Fratelli Tutti 78, he says, difficulties that at first seem overwhelming are really opportunities for growth. We want our young people to be game changers, world improvers, lovers of neighbours. We want our young people to know that the dignity that they profess is also the dignity that everyone else deserves. It's our best chance at peace. Education. It doesn't feel like that on a Monday in February when it's snowing or cold. I don't suppose it snows where you live. I have no idea. It snows here. It rains a lot. But on those cold, wet mornings when you'd kind of rather stay in bed, there is a strong, rich, and noble why to what we do, which is perhaps a good place to leave it. This is what I want to finish by asking you just a few questions. Firstly, do you ever catch yourself shrinking? Going back to video number 1. Question number 2, going back to video number 2, can you stay closer to the bigger why? And number 3, what in all of these 3 videos has struck you most? St. Francis de Sales once wrote that more flies are attracted to a spoonful of honey than a barrel full of vinegar. What are you talking about? A spoonful of honey or a barrel full of vinegar, right? Well, the vinegar is you've listened to me now for 3/4 of an hour, 3 15-minute videos. That's the vinegar, barrel full of vinegar. But the spoonful of honey is the one thing that struck you in all of these videos. What strikes home, what resonates? That's the honey. What have you heard, thought, or listened to that's made you think, yeah, I need to think about that a bit more? So there you go, 3 questions. Do you catch yourself shrinking? Can you stay closer to your why? And thirdly, where was the honey in the last 3 videos? I hope you can find some. Thanks for listening. I hope one day to meet you, but in the meantime, please experience our love from all the way across the pond here in England. Thank you to Dr. Samuel Torres, and I hope that you have a good day. God bless. Bye-bye.